Mayor Hopewell.
Present. May we have a motion to excuse the Vice Mayor and Commissioner Cunningham?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Anderson, supported by Commissioner Urban. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. For our opening ceremony this evening, we will have an invocation by Chaplain Mike Kemple of the missional chaplain. I would ask that you stand for the invocation and remain standing for the pledge. Good evening, Chaplain.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Father God, I thank you for these proceedings tonight. I thank you for your hand upon each man and woman who lead and guide in this city. Father, I thank you so much for those who bring peace and safety into our community, those who are first responders. Lord, I pray that you would give great wisdom to those who would conduct this proceeding tonight. Thank you for a heart for a diverse people, a unique people that we call Kalamazoo City. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioners, you have the agenda before you this evening. Are there any changes? Hearing none, anyone in the audience wanting to comment on items under the consent agenda, that's items under F, that item will need to be moved to the regular agenda. If you have an item, please indicate at this time. You can indicate from right there.
I'd like to set aside Articles 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the consent agenda because I think they may be tied together.
Thank you. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Thank
3,
you.
4, 5, and 6, yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. The consent agenda, please.
The following is being asked for approval. First is the approval of a change order with Whiteman and Associates for the Water Pump Station 5 construction project in the amount of $529,135. Next is the approval of the purchase of dump boxes with hoist and scraper from Truck and Trailer Incorporated in the amount of $279,633. Next is the approval of a contract for independent contractor services with Comstock Public Schools to operate the Kalamazoo Regional Education Service Agency Education for Employment Law Enforcement Program for the 2019-2020 school year. Next is the approval of a 5-year lease for office space for the Community Planning and Economic Development Department at 245 North Rose Street in the amount of $1,051,371, and approval of the use of contingency funds in the amount of $210,000 for current year increased lease costs, billed out of the space, moving, and related to expenses. Next is the approval of a quick claim deed for the property at 1301 Portage Street with Kalamazoo County Land Bank for the Portage Street Improvement Project. And finally, the approval of a quick claim deed for property at 1311 Portage Street with the Kalamazoo County Land Bank for the Portage Street Improvement Project.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Commissioners' requested action is the motion to approve the consent agenda and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Cooney,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Griffin. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham? Commissioner Griffin?
Support.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Mr. Manager, F1, excuse me?
Or 3.
Oh, no, F3, sorry.
Yeah. Approval of a 1-year contract for analytical testing services from Trace Analytical Laboratories Incorporated in the amount of $163,221.10.
Anyone wanting to speak on this item, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening.
My name is Nehemiah Scudder. I live within the city at 345 North Burdick, room number 303, and I think you all know me pretty much. Hi there, hi city commissioners. This Trace Analytical Laboratory scares me because with the current technology, with nanotechnology as it's called, they can detect trace elements in the scarcity of 1 part per billion, and we might get all kinds of trouble with testing children's urine for marijuana, alcohol, and other drugs. And I think that we shouldn't make this trace analytical laboratories contract, and it would be dangerous because we might put quite a few kids in jail for reasons that aren't really very good. Yes, they are. Well, anyway, that's my position. Because of the technology being so great, we can detect trace elements in the concentration of 1 part per billion or even a trillion. And some of the kids that may have experimented with marijuana or alcohol or other drugs like tobacco might be hurt by that. And I don't know if we really want to go that way. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to comment on this item? Seeing no one, Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to approve and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion? Moved by Commissioner Urban,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Anderson. Discussion, Commissioner Anderson?
Could our city manager please provide a brief description about what the analytical testing is for and what it will do?
Mr. Manager?
Sure. This would be for services that would be for analyzing drinking water, municipal industrial wastewater, and residual solids for a variety of organic and inorganic parameters in both systems.
Thank you. Any other questions for the manager? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. F4, Mr. Manager?
Approval of a one-year contract extension with student haulers for the removal of disposal of trash, nuisances, and garbage collected pursuant to the enforcement of various city ordinances, sections 15A, 22-3, 4, and 5, in the amount of $120,000.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on this item, please step forward. You have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening.
I'm still Nehemiah Scudder, and you all know me. I do live within the city. And I worry about that word nuisances. Does that include people, or what do they mean by a nuisance? Can the city manager tell me that? Are we going to start rounding up people and putting them in jail for being nuisances? I've seen people sleeping on the pavement because they have nowhere to go, sleeping on park benches. Are they nuisances? What does they mean by that word nuisances in this 4th position? No reply? I think nuisances might be extended to round up many of the homeless and put them in jail or concentration camps as they are called. And we don't need that, I don't think. So I would like to see that word nuisances deleted from the 4th position. And I hope that it won't be a matter of rounding up people, but only taking care of garbage and trash. I support rounding up garbage and trash, but when it comes to people and considering them nuisances and putting them in jail for being quote unquote nuisances, that worries me. I have friends on the street, some of them are homeless, and that word nuisances bothers me. Could we have more clarification and possibly deletion of that word from this particular resolution? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address this item? Seeing no one, Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to approve and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Cooney,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Anderson. Mr. Manager, will you explain what this is, please?
Sure. The proposed contract is for the removal of trash and garbage. It's not intended to include human beings.
Thank you. Any questions for the manager? Roll call.
Commissioner Griffin,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. F5, Mr. Manager.
Adoption of a resolution approving the updated 2019 Community Planning and Economic Development Department fee schedule to reflect changes to the vacant blighted structures program that were adopted in Ordinance 1982 of April 15, 2019.
Anyone wanting to speak on this item, please step forward. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening.
I'm still Nehemiah Scudder. It seems to me that by vacant, blighted structures, it might mean abandoned buildings where some of the homeless find refuge. That worries me. I think several of these resolutions tonight reflect an anti-homeless position, and I don't support that. And I wish that we could not pass Amendment 5 because vacant blighted structures might be extended to be quite a few buildings that the homeless sometimes live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to speak on this item? Hearing none, Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to approve and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
I move that.
Moved by Commissioner Urban,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Anderson. Mr. Manager, Mr. Attorney, would you explain what this is, please? Or answer the gentleman's question?
This is because of the changes in the ordinance that changes our approach to vacant buildings that are monitored by the city. This is not an uncommon ordinance throughout Michigan where vacant and abandoned structures are monitored because they tend to be a place for refuse for people who are, yes, getting out of the elements, but they tend to trash those places. They tend to vandalize them, and they are subject to being open to trespass and fire hazards. As a result, these places are monitored by staff, and with both residential and commercial being added by the ordinance changes that were adopted in April, the fees have been changed to reflect that.
So this is work that we already do now in regards to monitoring vacant buildings and dealing with vacant buildings and structures from a safety standpoint or a dangerous building standpoint, all of those.
Correct, and making corrections where they need to be made.
Right. Any other, Commissioner Anderson?
Just more specifically, that was done a few months ago. This is just adjusting the fee schedule related to the activity. Correct?
That was the answer. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. F6, Mr. Manager.
Approval of a memorandum of agreement with the Kalamazoo Public Schools for school resource officer services for the 2019-2020 school year.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on F6, please step forward. You have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city.
I'm still Nehemiah Scudder, and I don't think we need police officers supervising schools. We've got along with the teachers so far, and this ties in with the earlier trace element analysis. If they find marijuana in the urine of some poor child, which is common, I believe, the police officer could trundle them off to jail, and we don't need that. We need to relax our penalties, not make them worse. And this particular amendment would bring actual uniformed police officers into the schools, and we don't need that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address this item? Seeing no one, Commissioners' requested action is a motion to approve and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So move.
Moved by Commissioner Anderson,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Cooney. On this item, there are school resource officers in the high schools in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo Public Schools looks for that. They contract for those officers. They work closely with the school district. They aren't there to go aggressively at students, and historically they have not done that. Right now at Kalamazoo Central, Kalamazoo Township Police provide service to them. At Kalamazoo Central, or Kalamazoo Loy Norix, we provide an officer and have for probably 10 to 12 years that's working closely with the school's security and the administration, along with, I believe, an officer maybe at Phoenix, but I'm not real sure about Phoenix. So it's a standard practice, and they're not typically going after kids and targeting kids. That's not typically what they do. They're really there as a resource. Commissioner Urban?
So it's my understanding that this is a long-standing practice, and if it weren't working, they wouldn't be asking for it to be renewed for this year. Is that true? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, in reading this, it struck me that what they do primarily is prevention.
Right.
Trying to develop relationships with the students, trying to offset any problems that are coming up so kids don't get in trouble. And I think they have a wonderful track record of being able to do that. So I think it's a really useful thing.
Any other comments, Commissioner? Roll call, please.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin,
yes,
Commissioner Urban.
Yes?
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Mr. Manager, G1, please.
Adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 15 of the Kalamazoo City Code, Fire Prevention and Protection.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on this item, please step forward. You have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening. Hello, Commissioners, Mayor, City Attorney, City Manager, Deputy Clerk. My name is Matt Mozarek, City Resident. I'd like to thank you all for having me here tonight. Coming to speak on behalf of some of my community on the fire pit aspect of this ordinance change. I've communicated with all of you, so I won't rehash too much of that. I just wanted to say that generally speaking, I do support the amendment with the caveat that I think the existing setback is a little too large. With a 25-foot setback, that's going to essentially make many yards in our community too small to even have a fire pit. You know, my own yard, many people in my neighborhood, we would not be able to comply with the law, whereas currently we do legally have fire pits. So I'm just all for keeping legal fire pits where we already have them while maintaining safety. So I'm going to advocate for a 10-foot clearance. That's what I've seen on many insurance websites. I've seen, you know, as I mentioned in my email, a variety of distances other communities have had. Some have fully exempt single and two-family homes. So I just wanted to come here and give voice to my opinion that we should scale that back down from the 25-foot to something. My personal opinion, 10 foot, but we'll see where you all land and where other folks in the community have to say. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Evening. My name is Andrew Argo. Live in the Vine neighborhood. Basically, I just want to kind of, this is going to be pretty short. I just wanted to kind of back up. and say that I agree with Matt's assessment. Kind of wanted to voice a bit of agreements with that. Maybe just talk a little bit about, I think there's definitely, we can figure out a better middle ground that preserves public safety while making sure that residents in the city still have autonomy. Talk a little bit the cultural significance of fire pits, particularly like, where I live in the Vine neighborhood. It's a place that people can kind of gather after work, after a long day, and really connect and conversate with one another. I personally, in my own yard, we have a little fire pits that we like to use usually, to basically do just that. Bring people together in a way, everybody puts down their phones and just kind of gathers around and chats. So I don't want it to be downplayed that, for many people, these fire pits serve a very important communal function for people in the neighborhoods. And I don't really think that should be missed when y'all decide the actual kind of measurement from the property to the fire pit based on what you decide on. Again, I think I will back up what Matt said with the 10-foot. I know there are certain concerns about properties being very close together, but again, in analogous cities, you've seen less stringent length rules. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, please.
Well, I'm still Nehemiah Scudder. I live within the city in the Rickman House. And I remember when I was a very young child, we used to burn the autumn leaves and roast marshmallows and have a good time. And if the 25-foot rule were put into effect, that would discourage this to a certain extent. So I think a 10-foot ABS limit would be more appropriate, and I hope that you will pass that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Also, folks, if you're standing in line, would you sign in on the document, please, while you're waiting? Good evening, sir.
Hi, my name is Matthew Oliver. I am a resident of Kalamazoo up at 1233 Blakesley Avenue. I don't need to say much more than everyone else has already said. I just want to support a careful and measured approach to a distance from established structures for this ordinance. I think 10 foot sounds good, but also I would be happy for the commission to have a more thorough analysis of whatever both keeps public safety and community rights and personal rights and all that together. So I don't need to reiterate everything else. I support everything everyone before me has also said. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Paul Dudek. I live in downtown. I'd like to add my voice to the list of people in support of a less stringent restriction on the bonfires in the backyard. I'm aware of a lot of places that would now be made ineligible to do that because of the size of their backyard, and we're perfectly safe keeping away from structures and haven't had any trouble. I'd also like to say that I'm in support of ordinance that intend to mitigate unsafe activity on private property. But I think one of the problems is that the people who will be partaking in this unsafe practice will not even be aware that this new ordinance has been made. So really what's happening is people like me who are aware of all these things and are safe anyway will be limited. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Hopewell and the City Commission. Thanks for letting me speak today. I would like to voice my opposition to this ordinance. I have a few concerns, and one is that the bill or the ordinance seems to discriminate against people in multi-unit homes. As we know, people who occupy these residences are typically less represented in the community, typically marginalized. And as we have a long history of institutionalized racism, we have to be careful going forward as we implement these ordinances. So I believe this group of people will be marginalized compared to others. I personally live in a single-family home, and there's some restrictions or parts of the ordinance that I find too stringent as well. Before I left my house, I measured my backyard, and I've got one of the bigger backyards in the neighborhood, second biggest, but the distance from my campfire to my home, to my trees around in my backyard was about 10 feet in each direction. So 25 feet from a campfire would obviously preclude a lot of families from having a fire. 10 foot is more realistic if we do implement these standards. In addition, I think the 3-inch log diameter is a bit of a stringent regulation as well, considering many people do not harvest their own campfire wood, and they'll be going to the local gas station or wherever to get a bundle of wood, and they can't really select for the diameter. So going forward, I would like to have careful consideration of the specific criteria for the ordinance. As well, I didn't see anything about the permit application process. I would like to have that clearly defined before we move forward with this. Is it going to be a prior inspection and approval by the Fire Commission? Will it be a timely thing where you can call the day before or the night of and have a fire? Or will it be something that's quite a bit more drawn out? So before I would like to see this passed or a rendition of it, I would like to see something about the permit process addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Hi, Jacob Rinker. I've grown up in Kalamazoo since I was a kid. 37 years in this town. I do agree with what you were saying about lower income families being affected a little more by this because of smaller property sizes. I grew up in Edison, and I know for a fact my mother's yard never would have been able to support one. And I just recently bought a home in the Vine neighborhood, and we've got a third of an acre, but because of the length and not width of the property, we wouldn't be able to do it without, excavating the entire backyard of trees to get something for space. It really, that 25-foot distance is just too much for almost anyone under a certain income level. And really, that's my biggest problem with it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Christopher. I live in the Vine neighborhood. I'd like to lend my voice in support of Matt's assessment. I also believe the cultural significance of fireplaces is, I wouldn't say a keystone of the Vine neighborhood, but it is a very important element of the community there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Chris Pradle, I live at 1203 Miles Avenue in the Millwood neighborhood. I'd like to echo the opposition with the others, including Matt. I live in the Millwood neighborhood where there's an ever-growing number of young families, single individuals who are coming to the neighborhood. And I know for a fact a family on Rice Street who moved there and said one of the appealing aspects to it that they always wanted to have their own piece of property to have a fire. I'm quite confident that with the 25-foot distance, they would no longer be able to have fires. I also know that it's, as others have mentioned, in our community and on our street, it's a way that people tend to get together, hang out with each other. It's what makes the community special. And I think a lot of people, when we're looking what makes our city attractive, might say, you know what, I'll move out to Mattawan. I'll move out to Paw Paw. Because I think for a lot of people, that ability in their backyard is a relatively important one. I'll go on to add as well, just on my small block on Miles, from what I could tell by walking by, there are at least 7 homes with fire pits, and I'm pretty confident that almost all of those homes would not be able to continue with the 25-foot distance. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Honorable City Commissioners, Honorable City Attorney, Honorable City Manager, and Honorable Deputy City Clerk. I just want to say how awesome it is to hear everybody in the community come here tonight and share their opinions. And I know some people brought up some things, like with the having to buy your firewood from other places, that some people didn't bring up last time. It's great to have a lot of people come together and speak and share their opinions, and I think that's amazing. And I also want to say thank you all. A lot of you guys even brought up the 25-foot thing last week, and I appreciate that you guys did that. And I also would like to say that I don't agree with the 25-foot rule, because then I wouldn't be able to be in my own house when I'm on fire. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address the commission on this item? Good evening.
Jeff Messer, city resident. At the last meeting 2 weeks ago, I asked 3 questions. The first question was, what is the rationale for exempting the recreational fires permit requirement at single-family homes and duplexes? I believe the fire marshal said the International Fire Code did not have standards for single-family homes, and he wanted to treat multifamily homes like commercial properties in the city, which are required to have a permit. My question is, how aggressively does the city intend to enforce the permit requirement for recreational fires? If strong enforcement is not intended, then the permit requirement will be an obscure, unenforced rule that only those of us who regularly attend city commission meetings will know about. That stance leads to selective enforcement. I'm assuming the city does not intend to aggressively enforce the permit requirement. Therefore, I ask that you please amend the proposed ordinance to completely eliminate the permit requirement for recreational fires. It seems that Ordinance Section 1547 prescribes a penalty for failure to obtain a recreational fire permit. As presented to you, it reads, any person who shall violate any of the provisions of the International Fire Code adopted by this article or fail to comply therewith shall be guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment for not more than 90 days or a fine of not more than $500 or both. The Commission stated that this whole effort of rewriting the entire Code of Ordinances came out of a desire to reduce misdemeanor criminal convictions in order to help Kalamazoo citizens with their employment and housing prospects. The proposed recreational fires permit requirement is not in line with that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address the commission on this item? Seeing none, Commissioners, the requested action is to a motion to approve. Is there a motion? Or a motion to adopt the ordinance? Is there a motion?
I move to adopt it.
Moved by Commissioner Anderson. Second. Supported by Commissioner Cooney. We're in discussion. Commissioner Anderson.
Just for information for folks who are here tonight, in order for there to be a discussion, there has to be a motion that has been supported and been on the floor. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an opportunity for discussion. So that is the reason that it's appropriate to take any proposed ordinance or other topic we're going to talk about and support it and ask for a motion of support so we can talk about it. So that all said, I would like an opportunity for maybe some response from city staff related to some of these things. It seemed like we ought to have some answer about a single family versus multi, distance to trees, a permitting process, clear about that, diameter rules. It is the case that, you know, if you go and buy these little bundles, they're often slab wood, you know, which is maybe 6 inches wide by 3/4 of an inch thick, not a 3-inch diameter. I don't know how that would work with that. Misdemeanor versus civil kind of a penalty. So that's a list of things. I can repeat them, but I don't know who best to respond to that.
Yeah, I would like Chief Thomas and our our assistant fire chief, Scott Brooks, come forward, please.
Fire Marshal. Yeah, join the Chief, Marshal.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
So just some of the things I'd like to cover tonight to answer some of your questions, Commissioner Anderson, relative to this recreational fire pit in the burning. Currently, the ordinance does not allow for it at all. So what this does is allow us to have those recreational fire pits, but also make them safe for all our community, whatever we decide that looks like. Currently, we had recommended 25 feet because we're always going to err on the side of safety. We look around, we have a lot of aging houses within the city, and we look at that significance that too close to a structure could cause a fire. What that distance is, I guess, is yet to be determined. We also looked at different communities. I think there might be a comparison chart of what was allowed there as it came to fees, permitting, and then restrictions. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this or if you have it in front of you. And we just pulled a couple comparisons. Now, it should be noted Portage and Kalamazoo Township have the 25-foot limit from a structure. So not from other trees, it's from an actual structure is what we're talking about. And if you look at various communities throughout. Most of them, some of them have fees of when a permit is required, and those distances all vary. Now, I can't answer to whether those cities have the same average lot size as us or that their houses are the same age, but it does vary by community. What we're looking at in this ordinance would not to have a permit for single-family or double-family or housing, but for anything above that. And that permitting process would be going on to our website. We'll have a click link where you can fill out online or come in and set up a process to get a zero-cost permit. This would allow the fire marshal and his staff to go out to that residence within a 14-day time frame and observe where the residents would like to put a fire pit, if that's feasible in that location, and walk through some fire safety issues. That permit would be good for 1 year. We're looking April 1st through March 31st of the previous year, so you would have 1 year and then have to renew that annually. Many times on multifamily dwellings, there is turnover in residency. So that would ensure that we're consistently knowing who has the permits out there, but also educating residents. Can you touch base on a couple more of your questions you had there?
Diameter of
So the
material?
diameter of the wood is limited to 3 inches. We just had the discussion. I'll let the fire marshal step in when he talks about wood diameter and that like.
We were discussing the size of the wood, and so what we're discussing is a 3-inch diameter, 3 foot long, and the pile wood cannot be any more than 3 foot high. That's a pretty good sized fire. Most of the wood, if you go to a speedway or something like that, the diameter of the wood would not be anything more than 3 inch in diameter. The way that it may be bundled, it may look like it is, but once you open that package up, that wood is not any bigger than that. So the idea is that someone could buy a prepackaged bundle of wood and use that for a bonfire at their house, a recreational fire, sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate all that information. So just one more time, then the cost of the permit would be?
Zero.
Zero, right?
Yes. Could I also show some examples of what we're talking about as what a recreational fire pit would look like?
Yes.
I think we have a picture of that. So when we're talking about approved outdoor devices of recreational fire pits, we just have a couple of examples up on the screen of what we're talking about. Just trying to contain that because we just want a process in place to define what's allowed because we do get frequent complaints about my neighbors burning and having to go out and educate the public. So we just want those clearly defined rules because we too think it's a good thing.
Chief, can you, they requested misdemeanor versus civil infraction. My understanding from the city attorney, that came from public safety. Can you give us a why?
Mayor, I don't have an answer for that tonight. I was going to refer that back to the city attorney as to why that would be a misdemeanor versus a civil infraction.
Assistant City Attorney Wenslick is here. Perhaps she can answer that question.
Good evening, Sarah Wenslick. This is something that I've spoken with Fire Marshal Jim Williams about. That's how it currently is in the ordinance. So that is something, in keeping all of the violations with this ordinance as misdemeanor, that's something we kept the same. Just in speaking with Fire Marshal Jim Williams, it would make it beyond a reasonable doubt versus a preponderance of evidence as a civil infraction. And since the International Fire Code addresses it as misdemeanors, that's something we kept the same without changing it to civil.
Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, in the list that you gave us, there's 10 municipalities here, and 4 of them allow 15 foot. Nobody in the list that you gave us allows it to go down to 10 feet. So I'm just wondering, in your opinion, is 10 feet too close?
Yes, I think 10 feet is a pretty close distance, and one unexpected gust of wind or walking away from a fire for a minute just exposes those structures. I mean, we see it daily in our firefighting that the first thing we do when we start a firefighter is look at the extension in those houses that are in the immediate vicinity of what's on fire because we know how quickly fire can spread. And would you like to add anything else, Fire Marshal?
if you're looking at the typical house in, let's say, the Vine neighborhood, where you get a little more dense population, if you're looking at a residential fire or recreational fire that's 10 feet from the structure, that 10 feet from the structure could be less than 10 feet from another structure. And if you're limited down to 10 feet, then most likely someone's going to say, well, if it's 10 feet, then they can go a little bit smaller than that. So keeping it at a minimum of 15 feet at the bare minimum, as some of the other places have mentioned, it would be the safest thing. Obviously, we would propose the 25 feet from a structure. However, other municipalities have done differently.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions
So,
for these? Commissioner Erwin?
I have a kind of a hypothetical question. Right now, residential fire pits do not require permits in this proposed ordinance. It's only for commercial properties, and that's my understanding.
Currently,
So, if we were to lower the there's places where you've shown that it could be 15 feet would be the clearance that's required. Would it be safe enough, would it be adequately safe to say that if the allowed distance is less than 15 feet, you have to have a permit, otherwise you could go ahead and do it without a permit? Just so that if you're going to be really down to something that's gets to be potentially problematic, a lot of it's going to depend on the exact conditions at that particular location. Is this fire pit pretty much like a furnace that's enclosed, or is it going to be something that really can get away pretty easily? It makes a lot of difference, and so it seems to me that you could have some flexibility there to have a smaller clearance distance, provided the understanding is that the permit may not be approved if the fire marshal finds anything less than, say, 15 feet particularly problematic. I mean, is that something that's doable, in your opinion?
as far as having a 10-foot and
Yeah.
then having everyone get a permit?
No, having a 10-foot for anything less than 15 feet, between 10 and 15 feet, you have to get a permit.
I would say the minimum that we would propose would be 15
Okay.
feet.
All right. Okay.
Other questions for staff? Thank you both. Any further discussion from commissioners? Commissioner Anderson?
I would like to offer an amendment. What steps will we have to take to do that?
Just offer the amendment.
Well, then I move to amend 15-41, parens 5, addressing the conduct of approved recreational fire outdoor devices, and amend 1541-parens 6, addressing the use of portable outdoor fireplaces to reduce the minimum distance for their operation from any structure or combustible material from 25 feet to 15 feet in each case.
We have an offered amendment. Is there support?
support.
Support. We are in discussion regarding the amendment. Hearing no discussion, roll call regarding the amendment only. Roll call, please.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Thank you. Motion carried. We are now still in discussion regarding the ordinance as presented, or in discussion of the ordinance, rather, excuse me. Commissioner?
I just have one follow-up question here. I think it's a worthy question that came from, to us tonight, relative to our desire to decriminalize, and we have that motion. Is this counter to that desire, this action we're taking here? I understand this consistent with other portions of our enforcement side in this ordinance, so I'm not sure if this is creating confusion, but that doesn't seem to be, consistent with our general intent.
And just to add into that, and maybe the assistant attorney can come back up, I think I heard you say that this makes it consistent with the rest of the ordinance, if I'm not mistaken. Now, maybe I didn't hear that correctly, so if I didn't, you can correct me. And if I didn't hear it correctly, you can just tell me I didn't hear it correctly.
Yes, you did hear it correctly. The entire ordinance for Chapter 15 falls under as a misdemeanor. So that covers the entire chapter. In keeping it consistent with the entire chapter and trying to separate things. That's how it currently is. In making the amendments and trying to update this fire code, that's something was proposed to keep it the same as it currently is.
So what's the name of the chapter? What's the chapter title?
Fire code.
Okay.
Fire code and prevention.
And so with the work that the city attorney's been doing, is this one of the chapters we were going to be looking at for decriminalization?
This was more of a chapter that needed updating. I don't know that it was one that was listed for a decriminalization. That was more the general crimes and other various chapters.
Okay. Chief and Fire Marshal, I'm going to call you back up. I guess my question, continuing my question then, does this, leaving it misdemeanor or making it a civil infraction, does that change our ability to enforce? So for example, I know we typically give warnings anyway, so that just keeping that in mind, folks, we do more warning on these types of things than we actually arrest someone for. And it's my understanding that these fires technically are not allowed now, and we probably give warnings. And I saw some people shake their head saying they are allowed. I've been hearing from the city attorney and the clerk and others that they're not, whatever. Does one or the other impede upon trying to deal with getting the fire out? So that's me. If you have a complaint, give somebody a warning. And you look at it and they're too close, you need to move it. You get another complaint, they don't move it, they're too close, or you're getting smoke in someone's house, or whatever. So I guess I'm wondering, what's the difference? One's a ticket, one's...
Whether or not it's a misdemeanor or a civil infraction, the ordinance clearly states a public safety officer can have you put that fire out if they deem it's unsafe or as a nuisance. And so our ability to go in and address the issue, we can do that regardless of if it's a civil infraction or a misdemeanor. We would address it the same way.
Thank you. And so going back to my question, it's my understanding that you said that this was not under review for decreasing the severity of this?
Well, again, the city attorney's office is looking at all chapters.
All chapters.
This is more of one that needed an update because we're using a 2009 fire code. As far as the decriminalization, I can't tell you for sure.
Okay. Chief, I saw some kabitzin between you and the marshal. What else you want to share?
No, he was just recognizing that if we had a problem area, that we had repeated offenses, that sometimes that misdemeanor does help us out in those cases. But I think generally when we get these type of calls, historically, it's been a warning, and people do realize the safety of the issue. So for me, whether it's a misdemeanor or a civil infraction, we'll address both those the same.
And will there, if this was the change from a misdemeanor to a civil infraction, is there, if this occurs over and over, what happens if this is a reoccurring issue? Because I'll explain why I'm going there.
And I think if it's a reoccurring issue, then we would look more at our nuisance ordinances versus just the ordinance for violating the fire code. Okay. So we do have other options available.
Another tool. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to try not to have you come up again. We're in discussion, and I'm going to, since I've been on this line of questioning, and just for the audience, I can't make a motion as mayor. They don't allow you to do that per Robert's rules. So I get to ask all these questions with the hope that my colleagues heard them, but if they don't make a motion for a change, that's okay. So again, just to reinforce this, and I appreciate someone asking if we're going to be enforcing this from forth. We got lots of laws that we don't aggressively go after, nor should we necessarily aggressively go after. But when there is a complaint, that initiates that need, that contact, which that gives the officer a tool to use in the toolkit. And that's so, you know, we can aggressively go after speeders, but we don't aggressively go after them all the time. So I get this, I understand the concern there, but we have laws in the books, and we should, that aren't ones that we're out there standing every second and have even the man or woman power to go out and deal with that. Hearing a little bit about what the Assistant City Attorney has said, I understand we're working on decriminalizing our ordinances. I also understand that this is typically a warning anyway. I do believe that this chapter should be looked at. I don't know if we want to incrementalize at the moment, but just give direction that we need to look at this chapter and see where we can move it onto the list of the many things that we've been working on to decriminalize. That's just a statement I wanted to make regarding that, but I think it's one that should be looked at. So. Is there further discussion?
Yeah,
Commissioner
just to
Griffin?
kind of follow up with what you were saying, I would just be interested to know, as it stands, how many people have gotten misdemeanors, or how big of a problem is it from public safety, what those numbers look like. And I don't know if you guys have them now. Sorry to have you come back up here, but.
I didn't get your entire question.
To date, with the ordinance as it's already written, how many misdemeanors have you all issued, or how big of a problem is this for you all to have to come out? How many people are repeatedly doing this?
I don't have those specific numbers. I can get those for you. It is a frequent call, especially during the warmer month, that my neighbor has a fire that I feel is out of control, or we'll get the call, the house is on fire, and we'll get there and it's a recreational fire pit. But I can get those numbers for you.
Thank you. And folks, keep that in mind. I know we've had all these folks advocating that you want fires, and I love them too. But we're not doing this just for no reason. Fires do occur from this happening. Not every day, but they do occur. We do have neighbors that are in these tiffs sometimes where smoke's coming in my house. I've heard it walking doors that my neighbor's always burning and my kid has asthma, and I talk to them about it and they won't not do it because they feel it's their right to do. I get it. So this is all relational, neighbor, loving each other and trying to figure out how you get along. It's not just about a city ordinance. And so the intent is that we hope that all you folks that have these are also talking to your neighbors and being neighborly and working out how you are going to do this, not just I should be able to do it. That's what neighbors do, I would think, I would hope. But we know it doesn't always happen that way. Further discussion? Roll call. Mr. Attorney?
I would just respond that in regard to criminal versus civil, we'll go back and take a look at it, but I would expect a nuanced approach in coming back to you. I would anticipate that if there was actual personal injury or property damage, that would remain a criminal matter. If there wasn't, then we could look at reducing it to a civil infraction.
Yeah, that's why I knew some of those nuances, so trying to do that here tonight just doesn't make sense, and part of probably why it's still in there from national thinking, and other cities probably have it that way too, so there are reasons. Other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Mr. Manager, you have a report this evening?
No, Your Honor.
Madam Clerk, you have a report this evening?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Attorney, you have a report this evening?
No, Your Honor.
We are now at citizens' comments on anything this evening. Please step forward. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Good evening, sir.
I'm Nehemiah Scudder, and I'm concerned about several issues tonight. Testing for parts per billion in various things limits the freedom of people to experiment with things like marijuana and other drugs. Putting police officers in the schools limits the freedom of our children. We just had a long discussion of limiting fires to an unreasonably small area or large area or whatever it is. All these are freedom issues, I believe, and we're increasingly limiting the freedom of people to live as they would like. That will drive people out of the central city, and we'll eventually have nothing left but the drugs which we get from the alcohol purveyors on the mall. We need to relax some of these restrictions, allow people to smoke marijuana if they so choose without having to worry about it being a medical problem. Actually, from conversation with people who have illegally tried it, I understand that heroin is quite a good pain reliever. Of course, it's also addictive. If we can relax some of our rules against heroin and opium and crack cocaine in a similar way, and let people experiment with these as they wish. And if they go too far and become addicted and start stealing, there are laws against stealing and other problems that manifest the problems associated with drugs. But it would be a step towards greater freedom. And I support freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Jody Dozman. My mail goes to 500 North Edward Street. I live in Kalamazoo. I'm homeless. I'm homeless because of a situation that happened at an apartment complex. I'm winging my time up here. I should be taking footnotes. My notes end up missing. The letters I type up at times end up missing from the apartment complex to coming out into the public. I've had many situations that I like to explain to the police. I've been thankful that they listen. Sometimes I think there should be a privacy box in there because some of the stuff said doesn't need to be heard by others following that person wanting to know the information being told to the police. My opinion. I have a lot of opinions. I have mental perception. I have opinions on them. I have actual occurrences that happen that are invisible. I cannot show you. I've shown things on my phone, then my phone ends up missing with the evidence. Some stuff I've shown to the police, and some stuff has just disappeared to the wayside. You know, my opinions, I'm up here to try to find out and express myself to find out what is real and what isn't. Some of my stuff is right on. I mean, I had a friend from the National Guard. I would hope, you know, her brother's a police officer. I would hope that her being trained like that, she would have helped me with my perceptions, not cause trouble based on lies and jealousy, trying to have nicer things than I have. I would gladly build her up. I love doing stuff like that. I don't know what the problem is. I'm trying to sort it out. I have stuff, like I say, I should have the footnotes because I have 100 ideas going on and things that I get up here, I get a little nervous about. I have professionals that have experienced stuff other ladies have said there. I've had experiences myself that I've explained up here. And you know, Urban, like lots of crying babies and crying women, which is on my mind coming from like Heritage Hall and why they changed it from East Hall to Heritage Hall. Somebody's heritages are involved, I'm sure. Hard telling honesties. The visible, invisible. You know, that's like taking out nursing groups. That was a sad thing you did because people learn things like mold intoxication. So like I learned the bubonic plague. That would be millions or hundreds of thousands of people crying in the streets dying from the plague. And it's been recorded. You know, things are real. And things need to be adjusted. And sometimes opinions matter and sometimes they're just off to the wayside. Sometimes I go by what I comprehend mentally, and sometimes I go by what I'm actually experiencing and visualizing and setting up or making statements so I know better. Some stuff I'm positive of, some stuff I'm reaching out for help, trying not to leave criminal activity undone. I need to sort that out, and I need help sorting that out. That's like the spaceship. I have these ideas. It's kind of hard to sort out reality from mental perception, how close I am to the reality of it. It's fun. That's nice. And I hope to keep trying. I hope I make the connections properly. I'm the one bringing it in first, so it's going to take time and effort. I thank you for listening. I'm going to have to start to take those footnotes so that I can come up here and read where I'm skipping out on ideas. But thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Mark Rupert. I live at 801 Oakland Drive. I own a brewery downtown, and we've been pretty successful over the last 6 years. We also started implementing a cannabis club that ran for 7 months. Now that the new laws are out, we've helped pump the brakes a little bit because we don't want to get too crazy with violations in case the rules, we don't want to go out of those bounds. Moving forward, we're hoping to open a medical facility and a consumption lounge in our building we're at now. But the zoning has been so, you guys did not opt out, but the zoning is so purple as far as being able to put anything in the downtown district that there's only 2 locations that are off of Douglas, and the other one is about 2 blocks next to that, which is in an actual neighborhood, and it's a parcel. It's not even a building. So I think that the success of our cannabis club and the community that's embraced it, we should be able to move forward with something more positive in the aspect of a medical marijuana facility, which eventually we'd like to make recreational when it's available, and a consumption lounge which we can put in there. So I ask that we raise a motion of some sort to rezone and look at what the actual implementations of these facilities might be in the downtown district, because right now anything else is going to be bought up by big pharma or big money that is coming from Canada, and the mom and pop shops and the people that are really trying to do something with it are going to have nowhere else to go. And I think the downtown deserves it. I think the people have spoken for it, and we would like to put it start in our facility. You guys have already said that you'd like to have 3 downtown. Right now there is 0, and we don't have anywhere to go because of the zoning. So I'd like to ask that we can rezone the downtown to give at least a few places the opportunity to thrive from this. As a local business owner, I know I'm one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Anyone else? Good evening.
Jeff Messer, city resident. Again, I'd like to invite anyone who has any zoning issues to come to the Planning Commission meetings. Those are held on the first Thursday of every month in this room, City Commission chambers at 7 p.m. So the next meeting will be in September, the first Thursday in September. Commissioner Urban often comes. For anyone who is here at the meeting tonight, Community Planning and Development Director Rebecca Kick is in the back of the room, so you can speak to her about setting up rezoning request. Also related to community planning and development, on tonight's consent agenda was an item to relocate the Community Planning and Development Department to 245 North Rose Street. That's part of Plaza Corp properties across from KVCC. So if you need to do any business with community planning and development, you're going to need to, for the next 5 years, go to 245 North Rose Street. And finally, related to community planning and development, this Wednesday at 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts on West South Street, just down the street from City Hall here, will be the first public meeting for the redesign of the downtown streets. So if you want to participate in that and have your input heard by city staff, come to the KIA this Wednesday at 6:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address the commission? Seeing no one, we are at commissioners' comments. Commissioner Griffin.
Yeah, I just want to speak to it for a brief moment. Last week or the week before that, these days are just kind of all flying by at this point. There was National Night Out. and I had a chance to visit most of the neighborhoods. But then within the last week, we had more shootings in this community. And it doesn't matter if I'm personally affected, it still affects me. But this last time, particularly, I'm affected because there was a shooting that happened during the day, around like 5 o'clock or so. And so this happened in an area near Lacrone Park where my son and his friends play regularly. And had it not been for his friend's birthday, he would have been at the park that day. Pissed off is not even the words I have for that. I don't even have the words for that because it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There's never really an acceptable time. There's never an acceptable time. But 5 o'clock in the afternoon blows my mind. We have children over here playing at a public park. And so, you know, these are things that you can't police your way out of these. You can only do so much, having the city have ordinances, having the police come in and have 1,000,001 police officers and over-policing a community. It's time for the community to stand up and do some more work, because there are more of us in the community who care about what's going on than those who do not. And the North Side in particularly gets an unfortunate rap for some of the things that go on over there. But I promise you, myself and many others care about what goes on in this community. We care about our children, we care about our residents, and we're just, enough is enough. Just period. Enough is enough, and we're not tolerating anymore, and there will be some changes made. Our community, our children, our families, our residents, they just deserve better.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Anderson?
So I have something to say, but I want to pause just for a moment. Let the words from my commissioner friend next to me, Commissioner Griffin, resonate just for a moment. I guess we're lucky that nobody was hurt, but we have to remember that this is something that we all have to work on together to change, and we really need to be very intentional about supporting those who are interested and deeply committed to doing that work. So thank you for lifting that up. I was going to mention the fact tonight that a long-time leader in our community who grew up on an apple farm, his name is Don Gilmer, passed away recently. Don Gilmer happened to be a Republican, and he served a long, long time in the State House before he was term limited out, served some other positions, state budget director, also as the county administrator, and was a very human, decent, and caring person who demonstrated the capacity to work with people across the aisle for nothing other than trying to make communities where we live, state of Michigan and our local community, be a good place for everyone. And I know there'll be some community events that will recognize him. Unfortunately, in some ways, he feels like he is from a time that doesn't exist right now. And I do happen to feel that not only do we have tough times now, but for a variety of reasons, it feels like tough times are going to be lasting for a little while. And if we are to successfully address issues coming out of these tough times, that we are going to need people who are willing to work with one another in community, as Don Gilmore did. So I just want to recognize him and give my condolences to his family, but really recognize his long and stellar history as a leader.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cooney?
I think that the words of my colleagues are very, very important, and I commend them for what they're saying. It's calling our attention to those things. Don Gilmer was a wonderful example about people who had to work for a common agenda. What is good for ordinary people? What is good for the community? And that's something we got to get back to. What I want to talk just briefly about was, this is the last meeting we're going to have before Labor Day. And for most of us, Labor Day means we get a 3-day weekend, and that's wonderful. I'm not against that. I'm for that. But Labor Day is meant to be much more. It's meant for us to recognize the dignity of everybody who works. Martin Luther King said one time, all labor has dignity. And Martin Luther King died in the struggle for workers to organize themselves into a union. So I think on Labor Day, we honor workers, we celebrate the victories that workers have won. I think we don't teach people enough about labor history and the way workers were treated in the past and what they went through until they organized and fought for justice and won so many victories. And I think the third thing that has to happen on Labor Day is we have to recognize the ongoing struggle of working people. In a country where 10% of the people have more resources than the bottom 90% by far, it is disgraceful that ordinary people who work cannot earn a living wage. Just in our community, the United Way, in their study, says that people who work, of the people that work in this community, almost 40% of them struggle just to meet their basic needs. So on this Labor Day, it's important to recognize that we need a living wage campaign in this country. And we have to take this occasion to celebrate workers and to fight for their rights.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Urban?
Thank you. And to echo what was said about Don Gilmer, besides recalling how great a public servant he was, I'd like to suggest to all of us who are politicians and all of us who are wannabe politicians that we try to emulate how Don Gilmer went about doing his work. I would say the term I would use for the way he operated is a problem solver. He could work without having to have labels attached to him about what party he belonged to. He was accessible to everybody, and people from both parties came to him when they really wanted to have something done, rather than having posturing occur. So when we remember Don, let's try to act like him too. Another thing I'd like to say about gun violence, this is an issue that's a national issue, and frankly, I've been quite discouraged about it. We have a senator, a leader of the United States Senate, who's probably the most powerful person in the country, who's probably going to prevent anything from happening. And so nothing probably is going to happen until a bunch of people who are currently in office at the national level are removed and replaced with people who can actually vote for sensible gun laws. It's been horribly distorted by the NRA, and I'm very disappointed in my fellow human beings who can be so docilely misled by the demagoguery of that organization. So what we can do locally, Patrice mentioned that over-policing is not the answer. That's the impression I got from what you said. But her determination still is needed, but I want to be sure that we direct it at state and national leaders as well as locally. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're adjourned.